Hi there YouTube, this is Clormo from Clormo Industries Music Group, bringing you part number 5 on my Logic Pro X tutorial series on making sample beats. And part 5 is going to be 3 parts, so this one's part 5A. What we're going to do here is just laying some drums. Part 5 is going to deal with drums. So I'm going to divide it in 3 parts because I want to talk about the simplest way of putting some drums together up to using an ESX24 sampler or Ultra B. And another note that I wanted to make before I continue is that I have my notes over here, so I'm gonna be looking at them just to make this seem a little bit more natural. In my first 4 videos, I try to keep it less distracting for the viewer when I was in the frame, but it's gonna be easier and faster that way if I just look at my notes and instead of stumbling with my words. So to recap, part number 1 was detecting tempo. Part number 2, I showed time stretching versus chopping. Part 3, we did some time stretching using flex time. And with part 4, we did some audio chopping to create samples. So the reason I put all those first is because it's gonna be mentioned in this video. So if you go through this tutorial and feel lost at some time, I suggest that you look at those first 4 parts and then come back, and that way you will understand some of the terms that I'm going to use and not get lost. So again, 3 parts, and part A, what I'm just going to show is just sampling drums, which will be using either Logic's own Apple Loop library or using sound packs from the internet or using sampled drum parts from songs, and that's why it will come in handy to look at the previous parts, because I'm not gonna go into sampling a drum from a song and then putting it here that has been covered, so to speak. So in part B, I'm gonna lay down the ESX24 sampler and then how you can add samples to ESX24. I have shown that before in my previous videos, and I'm gonna show a quick thing how to do it here, but in part B I'm gonna go into much more detail what the other stuff you can do with the ESX24 itself, not just adding the samples. And then for part C, we'll do similar to the part B of the ESX24 sampler, but using Ultra Beat, which is a sequencer that's very popular to use in Logic. It's very simple to use. I should say it's simple to understand and get into it right away. It takes a lot to master because it has a lot of settings that you can play with if you need so, and I suggest that when you see that part, you definitely go in there and explore all the options that it has once I go through them, so you can get proficient with it, because it's a very good tool. I started using it a little bit more recently. Comes in handy, saves time, so in the end, if you can save time and be more efficient, I believe that's a good thing. So let's start right with the tutorial. I will try to go a little bit quicker this time in the tutorial itself. So I have 2 tracks, and what I intend to do is in this first track, which is empty right now, I'll just find a full drum break. And again, you can go to part 1 through 4 and sample a drum break from any song that you like and do the exact same thing that I'm gonna do here, but to save some time, I'm just gonna go with the Apple loops. So right now I already have it filtered to what I want to look, and that's to save some time. So when you go to the Apple Loop library, you can filter pretty much through all these categories that you have here, and this is the simplest way to find a drum part or a drum break that you can use in your beats. You know, there's nothing wrong with using Apple's own library. I know there are purists like me that sometimes would say like, no, I'm not gonna use those sounds, they sound like crap or whatever. That might be right to some extent. You know, there are some sounds here that are not that great, but there are some that you can use, and just experiment like anything. Like I have said in my previous videos, just experiment with what you have. So I already have this filtered by these categories, and I want to drop this drum break into this track to show you there's nothing. I'm gonna take a listen to it. So there's nothing really special about doing this. You just select your file and drag it into the track. Now this is the first message that we're seeing here. This is important. This is telling us that this file has some tempo information, and if you're paying attention to the library window, it already tells you that it's 90 BPM tempo. My project is at 70 BPM, so if I say import, it's gonna change my tempo to 90 because it already has that information contained in the file. If I click don't import, it's gonna keep it at 70 BPM, and this is the first note that I want to make, that if you're dealing with Apple loops, you really don't have to find the tempo of any of this. It's already has all the tempo information that you need, and you don't need to do anything. It's the file that you select is gonna conform to your project's tempo, and that's why I chose an Apple loop to quickly demonstrate the concept. So I'm gonna say import. I'm gonna hide the window, and let's just that's it. If I undo that and then put it again and say do not import, you see it already stays at the 2 bars because it's an Apple loop. So it's kind of doing similar to what we did with flex time, right? It already is going to stretch to whatever the tempo is in the project. Well, obviously it's going to sound slower. So that's pretty much it. You know, you can use the Apple Loops library, you can use your own library. And just to give you a quick look of how I have my stuff, when I go to the media folder here, the browser, in all the files I have inside my music folder, I have another drum breaks and sample folder, and then in there I have a few other category folders that have all these other drum break files that I have acquired from the internet mostly, and from some sampled song parts. And we're gonna go back to this break 2 down here in a minute, but for now, what I wanted to say, once you have your drum part, if it's an Apple loop, again, you change the tempo, nothing happens there. You can loop this, obviously. You can hit Command R to repeat it a few times, and then from there use some of the other stuff that I showed in the previous videos, like chopping some parts and eliminating some parts of the same drum break that you're using to create drops in the beat and all that. And you can also chop by each, you know, kick, hat and snare, and then separate into different tracks, EQ each track, and enhance or alter the sound that you originally have. You know, something very important to know, that EQing, which I'm gonna cover in a future video, helps you enhance or change how something already sounds. You can, you know, making sure that you understand how EQing works and what EQing can bring, and other effects like reverb. It's good to know because it's gonna help you probably use a similar sound that you've used before, not only for drums, that something that's one of your favorite sounds that you can reuse and change it around and sounds different. And there's nothing wrong with that either, in my view. You know, some of us have spent countless hours gathering and making all these drum libraries, only to find out that we go back to the same 10 or so sounds over and over because that's just conforms to our style and we like it. But on the other side of the coin as well, you should experiment and get different stuff out of your sounds and out of your beats. So with that being said, that's really all there is to just selecting a drum break that you have. And then brings us to the second part of the tutorial, which is using the same drum break and just extracting some of the parts, you know, sampling them. So let's say that that snare sounds interesting. So let's say that I just want that. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. Let's just say that I just want that that snare, and I want to save it as a standalone sound so I can have it for later. So what I'm gonna do is just use my Marquee Tool, and again go back to my previous tutorials to get a little bit more info on it, how to use it. And I'm just gonna chop at the transients, and if I mute these other regions, obviously it's just my snare sound, just making sure that I took the correct sound. And you can take that sound, export it out of Logic, and start building your own library. This is why I keep saying that there's nothing wrong with using Logic's own library sounds, because there might be a let's say, like, we're dealing with drum breaks, there might be drum breaks in there that sound in the overall don't sound that great, or you may not use them ever, or they're not attractive to you, to your style. But there might be sounds in those drum breaks that you can use, that you can take out, put them in your own library, start building your own custom library of sounds, and then you can make something completely different, right? So in this case, we're talking about this snare, and all you need to do, there's a couple ways of doing it, but there's a very quick one. Just right click on the audio region that I have, and this is true for any other audio file, not just drums, right? And you go to export, and then just export as an audio file, and then I can save it anywhere I want, my documents. I'll save it on the desktop, and I'll just call it it's called shoulder, let's say snare. And at this stage, it's not a do or die thing to know the tempo of where this came from, but it's a good practice to keep track of what the tempo information is because it's gonna save time, it's gonna save some headaches later, depending on the situation that you find yourself in. Now, I say it's not a do or die because it's just a percussive sound, standalone on the sound that you're probably not gonna have any problems by just extracting it and then using it later or on a sampler, or just laying it down wherever you want. It's almost a given. It's not gonna be a huge problem because it's just a single sound. But again, it's a good practice on the other side. It's a good practice to keep track of that. So I'm gonna save it as snare. I'm gonna say 90 BPM. And the reason why you see that there is because probably what I did earlier when I was testing, making sure that everything that I was gonna cover in the tutorial was good. So that's probably just the same thing. So I'm just gonna save it. And that's already saved in my desktop as a standalone sound that I can use later wherever I want. So to demonstrate that real quick, I will go to the second track where I have an ESX24 sampler. I'm gonna go into the full detail of the drums in drum sampling with the ESX24 in part 5B, but if you're a beginner, you don't know what to find the ESX24 sampler, I suggest you also go back to the other video. So I bring it up, and I'm just gonna go to edit, and obviously it's blank because there's nothing. So I'm just doing it this way because I want to show you how to do it without having to convert the sound into a sampler instrument, which is the previous way I covered it in my other video. So what I'm gonna do is just go to zone, right, and then go to load multiple samples. And at this stage I could load both of these even though they're the same sound, and it's gonna load them up in the ESX24 sampler, but I'm just gonna use the one that I just have exported previously, and it's gonna show you some basic information. If you paid attention to when I exported it, I already had these settings in there. I didn't go over them because these are gonna be covered when we talk about the final bounce of your beat. And I figure it's gonna be the appropriate time to talk into more detail about this setting. So I'm just gonna say add, and it's just giving me the location where that sound is, the name, all this other information. And when I say done, it's gonna bring me to this other dialog here, and all I want to do is just say that I want that sound in the C1 root node, right? And I'm just gonna say okay, and it's gonna drop it right there, and there's all the information. Made it already one shot. It's you can alter the pitch, you can reverse it, similar to what you can do with other sounds. So this is just another way of doing it if you're gonna deal just with creating ESX24 sampler instruments with drum samples. So, and there it is. And that way you can build a whole slew of sounds here. You know, you can add more snares, add kicks, add hats, cymbals, whatever you like, and then you can see those adding into the different zones here, and then you can use that with a MIDI instrument and play live drums. Obviously, it's one of the main reasons why you will want to do this. Once you have that there, you can either hit Command S to save it, or if you press the X, it's going to ask you if you want to save that instrument name. It's obviously being given based on how I added the track into the project, which I didn't cover because at this point you should already know this, but I'm not gonna save it because that was just to show you. And again, if I recap from previous parts, I'm just gonna do some quick slices here, and then just cover those instead of the whole thing, and right click and go to convert to new sampler track, and it's gonna be the same thing that I covered before. You can name it and create one shot zones, leave those there, say okay, and it's gonna create ESX24, but the difference is that it has a name, and I already have those 7 songs that so you see what that does. And that was clipping badly because I didn't bring the volume down, but that's okay. Hopefully that doesn't affect how it sounds in the end. If not, I'll have to edit it, but that's not biggie. But then that's another way of doing it, recapping some of the stuff that I showed you in my previous video, so not a big deal. This is a good way of building your own sampler instruments. What I wanted to cover is how to take a newly sampled drum break or some drums that you just play together in different tracks and exporting those into your Apple Loop library. So it's a very simple process. What I'm gonna do is gonna go back to this break number 2. Gonna bring it into another track. The reason why it falls very close to the 2 bars is because its tempo, it's close to that, but I'm just gonna make sure that I align it. You see what's 89. I'm gonna mute this guy here. So you notice that I took this from a WAV file from my custom sound library, not from an Apple Loop. So that's why they didn't ask me for tempo information or anything, because it's not embedded in the file. It's not an Apple Loop. So it's also good practice when you're sampling drums and drum parts that, if you can help it, right? If you have the time and you want to keep organized and you see yourself going back to either the full drum break or some of the sounds later, it's a good idea to save it as an Apple loop, because it's going to store the tempo information of it, and it's going to categorize it, and because it's going to be available in your Apple loop library. And you can also make it a favorite, right? And you can make favorite any of this. You can favorite any of those sounds that Logic already has. But again, if you see yourself going back to something that you did from scratch, and then it's a good idea to save it as an Apple loop, make it a favorite, and have it available for later. So to do that, I dropped that file there. I align it to the two bar measurement by finding the tempo using region length and locator. So I'm gonna right click and say export, and this time I'm gonna say add to loop library. And for here I can name it whatever I want. Let's just say I'm gonna say part 5A drum example, and I could put 89 BPM. You can do whatever you want here with the name, really. For now, all you need to know here is that you need to keep it with the loop setting here for type, because it's what we're talking about, right? It will automatically conform to a song tempo, and it will require the region length to match a whole number of beats. So, or just to cover what one shot is, it just does what it says right here. It will ignore the tempo and just maintain a fixed duration. Like if you were to have this in a CD, this sound in a CD, and I press play and it played the sound and then just died, right? The sound played it completely and that's it, no matter where you had it, and no matter what the tempo would wear of it. So from here you can select a scale, your genre. You can put some other descriptions to it that you can either hit here, different stuff, and then you can hit create, so I can show you the whole process, right? Okay, so should be saved. And let's see, if I go to my loops, let's see, there it is, and it stored the tempo information, but that's because of what the tempo of the project was, not because I entered the 89 BPM, and then it saved all the other different categories that I gave it, which were wrong. That's why it's a good practice to keep a note of it. Although if you save it as an Apple loop, it already tells you it's 89 and it's gonna conform to any tempo, so it's not a huge deal. Let's give it one last listen. Because it was 89, I'm at 80. You see it's hitting every beat as it's supposed to. So it's a good practice to do. And with that, that's pretty much all there is with this part 5A on sampling drums. So with that, I'm just gonna say, make sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with the different videos that I've been putting out for this series and future series. Also, make sure to like, share, comment on this video if you liked it. If you didn't, that's fine. More importantly, with the comments, if you have any suggestions or any requests for future series or future topics that you would like me to make a tutorial on, put something in the comments. Tell me, hey Clormo, talk about mastering, talk about this, talk about that, and I'll make sure that I at least acknowledge the comment right away. I'm gonna tell you, hey, yeah, I have something planned already and it might be dropping this time frame, or I'll just say, oh, I'll note it down, that's a good suggestion, I'll make it. Or if I say, hey, that's not one of my strongest points, I'm gonna take a stab at it. Or if not, look at this resource or look at this other video, I can do that too. So leave a comment, I guarantee I will respond to it. And last but not least, check the description for the links of my other social media pages: Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, Instagram. Not exactly in that order. I'm mostly on Twitter and YouTube, but my Facebook page is gonna be mostly to link it to my Instagram stuff that I should soon start to pick up again some of the writing portion of the poetry. That's how it's gonna. So make sure you like those and follow me there too, because it's not just gonna be about beats. There's other content coming, and also make sure to check out my webpage, www.clormoindustries.com. And again, everything in there is gonna link to what I have in my other social media pages. No, it's not gonna have a lot of original content on it. I have a few blogs that I'm gonna be releasing, some thoughts and some other information about me and the web pages. But for now, that's more how the web page is structured. And the beat store, for lack of a better term, how I call it, the digital music store. I have six free beats in there. I'm gonna probably add one or two more by year's end, let's say. Don't have an exact time frame how that's gonna be, and that's because I don't want to put a lot of free stuff out there, but I do want to put free stuff out there, obviously for appreciation for following me or checking the video or just visiting the page. And there's also a select portion of my beats that I have for sale. Those I don't see me adding much more there. If you want to know what else I have in my catalog, which is quite a few beats, then feel free to contact me at clormoindustries@gmail.com. Serious inquiries only, please just ask me. I work with artists of any budget, big or small. I'm not known in the game, I realize that, but you gotta start somewhere. And I don't want to give everything out away for free, and I don't want to just put everything on a generic beat store and say this is 200 and it has a license. No, I want to be able to work with artists and meet people, make relationships, work in a studio setting, all that stuff. So make sure you hit me up with an email or in the comment section again, and leave your thoughts on that if you want to know a little bit more about that. So with that, I'm gonna leave you for now. I realize that I'm trying to tell you about my beats, and if you're watching this video, you're probably only a producer or have aspirations of being a producer, so maybe you don't need beats. But if you know any artists out there or anybody that needs beats, then everything that I just said applies to them too. So make sure to share my page and follow me in my other social media pages. Peace out, YouTube. See you in part 5B.